Welcome to Sim History. Today I'm beginning what I hope will be the production of an entire world devoted to Louis XIV's France. And because every king relies on taxes, I started by creating the place where the people who will be taxed are going to live. And here it is, my Sim 4 facsimile of a French peasant village. My name's Pamela McVeigh. I'm a professor of history at Ursuline College in Cleveland. And by the way, what I have to say here is in no way, shape, or form the opinions or the policy of Ursuline College. This little simulation here is, of course, adjusted to fit the reality of Sims 4, which was not designed for the creation of peasant villages. But I think that if we talk our way through it, that you can get a good sense of what French peasants' lives were like, and you can enjoy some cute little Sim features. If you've played a lot of Sims, and why would you be watching this video if you hadn't, well, I suppose I could have assigned it to you. If you've played any Sims, you've probably recognized that these are some grim little houses, and they should be even smaller. Actual French peasant houses should be single rooms. What you would expect would be one pretty large room with a loft that you get up to by ladder. But there's no ladder function in this current game, so I have created second stories with the ladder steps as a facsimile of the loft. Sims of this period would not have had necessarily access to windows. That is, they wouldn't have had access to glass to make windows, so mostly they either didn't have windows or they had open spaces. And I've simulated that by putting in archways instead of actual doors at the fronts and entrances. And if you see this one little cabin, which is not quite like the others, that's for the richest peasant. They actually have a window on the bottom floor, which is part of how you can tell that they're different. And of course, they have an entrance that is not exactly the same as everybody else's. So let's look at the rich peasant's house, and everybody else's house looks the same except for this one little window detail, so it's not like you're missing anything. They all have the simplest roof I could manage because, there's no opportunity to do a thatched roof in The Sims. Their walls are made of dressed stone, which is nicer than your average peasant house would actually get. Well, some peasant houses would. It depends on where you are in France, or where you are in early modern Europe. I really wanted to do wattle and daub, which existed in Sims 2, but they don't have that, and nobody has... I didn't see it uploaded in any of the Mod The Sims, so I just went with the stone. And field-dressed stone, you can actually do dry stone wall building by hand and without a lot of tools, so we're just going to imagine that what this actually is dry stone wall. On the upper floors, we don't really have much, right? We just have a bed, because really they wouldn't have had very much upstairs. They would have had maybe some tools lying around, or they would have had kids sleeping there. You notice that I have put down grass for all of their floors, because though they would have probably had a solid floor on the loft, and they might even have had a stone floor in the main room, although that's not going to be the case all the time. It would have been covered with rushes. It would have been covered with long, skinny plant blades, and that would have been, in order to clean up, you just rake those out of the room. And we don't have that kind of thing in the modern Sims, so the best approximation I could get was grass. Or my solution to that was to give them all grass. On the bottom floor, we have, pretty much the furniture that you would expect in a 17th century French peasant house. They have a bed, and the bed is on the ground floor, not necessarily because it's a huge family. In fact, I'm not going to be able to put enough people in here to really populate all this village. I'll have, as many as the game will let me, but I think that's still only 8. Anyway, the bed is the primary showpiece of a 17th century house. It's the most highly desirable piece. And so every little Sim family has a bed. And maybe when I get actual Sims in here, I will permit them to decorate them with curtains with that cheat of where you could place an object on top of another object. Because that would actually have been what we would do. You'd put a curtain around the bed, and that would create your sort of pseudo-privacy. I've given them the air cushion doubles because they can't have a very comfortable bed. Even if they had a nice one, the mattress would have been, pretty sucky by modern comparisons. There probably would have been a table, and we have one here, and we have benches next to it. Actually, what we have is a picnic table, and they probably wouldn't have been quite this nice, but it's not too bad. It's not too bad an approximation. And finally, we had to deal with the food issue somehow. Now, I'm not going to let my Sims in this village make gourmet meals. That's just right off the table. So no refrigerator, which of course would be completely not period, and no oven, because as soon as you give them the stove, the oven, they could start making all sorts of fancy things that peasants would never have had access to. The grill has a limited option of things they can cook, which is appropriate. And they can get a relatively varied menu from using these plant boxes. I've put out 6 plant boxes for each little peasant house that's here. And when I put Sims in, they'll then be able to grow food to live. And I have taken one Sim all the way through level 10 of the gardening skill, so I do know that you don't have to be very far into the gardening to be able to support yourself on the food that you make through gardening. In fact, they're actually going to be much better fed than your average 17th century peasant, even if I only give them like 3 of these boxes per person or per family. But anyway, they will have access to the grill, which is going to be their combination fire pit and stove. In a real French peasant house, of course, they would have had an actual fire, an actual fire in a hearth, but we all know that the Sims cannot be trusted with fire. Every time I've used the open hearth on The Sims, some person gets caught on fire, and I just can't be doing that with The Sims. I do have one open flame. I do have an open flame over in my pseudo blacksmith shop, which is the hobby table. And that will have to be enough danger for them to enjoy for the period. Speaking of things to enjoy, they have a tiny bar. Well, everything in Sims is tiny, and I kind of like saying tiny. I'll try not to say it so often. They have a bar. They have a chess set and chairs, because you can't play the chess set without the chairs. Everybody that I've ever heard of has some kinds of games of strategy. This is not actually what French peasants necessarily would have played, but it's close enough. And I've given them a set of horseshoes, because they would also, boules is really common in France. Boules is a kind of like bocce ball, which is, it's kind of like horseshoes, only with round balls. Or like, if you've played, drat. There's anyway, it's a nice little outdoor game that doesn't involve a whole lot of athletic skill, and that you can play while drinking. And that doesn't require a very elaborate set of tools, right? Everybody's going to have horseshoes, even in a town like this. So that's their entertainment. No TV, of course. No stereo, of course, right? There's no electricity, but also no books, because most peasants couldn't read, and I will only allow them one musical instrument for the lot when they come in, which is probably more access to music than your average French peasant would have. In fact, their lives here are going to be a little bit nicer than that of most 17th century French peasants. we'll see. We'll see how the taxation works. When I get this, the taxes on this game do seem to be pretty high. So maybe when I get the Sims in, it will be brutally difficult to pay their taxes, and that would be an excellent simulation of the period. I'm just going to make up 8, random personalities, or as many random personalities as I'm allowed to make in here, make them all family, and drop them in and see what happens. But not today. That's